Hey guys, Christian here, and in this video I just wanted to have a really quick chat about a conversation I just had with my younger sister who I just dropped off at school, and we're talking about listening to music in class and, you know, whether it could be a good thing or a bad thing, how it works for some people, how it doesn't work for other people, and specifically what the point of view of the teacher might be on something like this. So it's really interesting because there's always a really unique spin on it, on the listening to music in class. So I just wanted to have a quick little rant because we got into a pretty heated conversation about it and I thought you guys might be interested. Check this out. So the conversation I just had with basically I just dropped off my wife's little sister at school and we were talking about how she spoke to a teacher and convinced her to let her listen to music in class because she said that it helped her concentrate more and there was a lot more going on, and the teacher was really sort of iffy and on and off, and I get that, right? Like, classroom's not a place for music, typically speaking, but for a lot of students they find it actually helps them to work a little bit harder. But teachers are so violently against this idea of anything outside the norm. For a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of teachers are so violently against the idea because they need every student to be working the same way. Now, the problem with that is that the system is actually designed for all the students to work the same way, and it doesn't work anymore. It hasn't worked for years. Every student learns differently. We know that now. We talk about it all the time, about adapting our teaching styles for different students and about adapting classroom routines and patterns that we use, all this kind of stuff. You know, we're talking about it on a day-to-day basis about how we need to customize the learning style to a particular student. But when it comes to the classroom environment, that's really quite hard. And, you know, for some kids, listening to a little bit of music while they're working is great, and it's all well and good and it helps them focus. Other kids really have trouble. And I think what, in my opinion, it actually comes down to is the fact that in the classroom there are two specific dynamics, right? There's usually two phases of a classroom lesson. And in one of those phases, music could work really well, and in the other phase, definitely not so well. So typically speaking, when you're in the classroom, right? If you were, say, teaching the class, for example, the first, I don't know, say 20 minutes or so, you're going to be working on explaining concepts, actually getting that knowledge and information out there, and getting all the students on board. And in that stage, what you really need is you need every single one of your students really switched on, really alert, really focused, because otherwise it's all going to go straight over their heads. Now, that's definitely not the stage that you would want music playing in their ears or phones out or laptops or anything like that, because you want 100% of your students' attention. After that, though, a lot of teachers really have this sort of little, you know, stigma about you have to sort of sit down quietly and do your work. And the reality is the kids don't do that because they can't sit still. You know, as a student, you just sort of, you've got energy, you've got curiosity, you know, there's distractions everywhere, and it's not going to happen. And for some people, music actually helps sort of lets them settle down, get into a bit of a rhythm and start working. Now, in this stage of, you know, the classroom or, you know, the class, typically speaking, after you've done all the actual educating, it's time to get down to a bit of work. And typically speaking, you know, in a perfect world where the students were all absolute angels and the teacher was just absolutely brilliant, the students would sit down quietly, not say a word, focus on their work, and that would be that. But the reality is that doesn't happen. However, there is still a bit of a grind element to it, right? Like, you know, students are still sort of just sitting there going through the motions, right? They're not as actively involved as when a teacher is, say, speaking or trying to actually educate. They're just going through questions, learning new things, maybe reading, it could be something along like that. And in those phases, a little bit of, say, you know, music in the ears or something like that could possibly work in their favor. It helps them settle, helps them focus, probably keeps them from talking to other people too much because they're happy just to sit down and get on. So I want you to think back to when, like, if as a teacher, if you're a teacher watching this, I want you to think back when you were actually studying and you were actually trying to learn these concepts, and it wasn't so much the active study component, it was the grind that you were going through. You know, it was going through workbooks and questions and all this kind of stuff. Now, if you were the type who had, you know, music on in the background, or you were the type to sort of sit in front of the TV and do your work, even when you're report writing now, where do you sort of sit down at the table and do you just sit there and focus, or do you like to have a little bit of something going on in the background, you know, a little bit of music? It could be anything like that. But the reality is when you're focusing on that grind stage, right, the stage where you're not actively learning or actively teaching, and you're just a little bit going through the motions, wouldn't it be nice to have a little bit of background noise? Now, for students, this is the same thing, right? That's what they're actually hoping for, and that's why you get all these kids all the time asking, you know, can I listen to a bit of music? If you can find a way to balance it out between the active learning component of your class time and the passive learning component of your class time, you know, the part where they're sort of just going through the motions, answering questions, going through the grind, if you can find that balance and you can find a way to appease students and let them work through their stuff in that kind of way, with that little bit of distraction, that little bit of background noise that sort of, gets rid of the absolute silence, the same way that you probably do whenever you're going through the motions in any of the work you need to do. You're going to find that students are a lot more attentive, they're a lot more happy with you, realistically, right? They're going to love coming to your class because, they get to listen to music, they think it's this big thing. The reality is, it's just helping them focus, it's helping them stay organized, as long as you can balance it out between the times where you need 100% attention and when you don't technically actually need their attention, you just need their attention on their work, right? That's not you specifically demanding students' attention. That's just a case of students working on stuff, just going through the motions, going through the grind, the same way that everybody has to. It's part of study. But if you can help facilitate that and make life a little bit easier for them, both in their minds and in reality, then you're going to have some much happier students who are much more willing to come to your class. They're going to rave about you and everybody's going to have a great time. Meanwhile, you've probably got a quieter classroom because everybody's got their headphones in and everybody's going to call it a win. Just try and balance it out between the time we need active listening, the time we need passive listening, and I think your classroom's going to look a whole lot nicer for you, the students, and the actual content is going to get learnt a whole lot better. Anyway, that's my opinion. Take it or leave it, whatever you want. If you have any interesting thoughts, I'd love to see them in the comments on this video. But otherwise, thanks very much for watching. This has been Christian, and I'll catch up with you later. Bye for now.